GM, everyone.
GM,
Hello,
GM.
hello.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Yep.
just to give some context for what this town hall's about, we kind of just want to go through some of the reasoning behind GovV3. We sort of want to cover sort of three main areas. We want to cover what the need for GovV3 is, essentially what wasn't working in GovV2, and I'll be going over that. We're also going to cover why we chose some of the specifics in GovV3, sort of how it solves the problems in GovV2, and Annie's going to be going over that. Finally, we'll be going over the future, sort of what is going to need to happen in the future under GovV3. So I guess I'll kick it off with GovV2, sort of what was working, what wasn't working. So we'll start with sort of what wasn't working. One of the things that was a challenge with GovV2 was the three-tier structure and all of the things that go along with that. Communication between councils, communications sort of across tiers of councils, and decision-making being fragmented and split between community, specialized, and IMC levels. This was something that we had a couple things that we implemented to address, but at the end of the day, it was just more complex than it needed to be for the value we were getting out of it. An additional thing that was a challenge with GovV2 was the increasing IMC requirements, particularly as it relates to engaging with regulators. If anybody hasn't had an opportunity to, you can check out governance news, but we've essentially put together a disclosure about our application to VARA. It is worth a read if you're interested in that kind of thing, but in engaging in activities like that, the requirements for the IMC are significantly higher than they were, say, 12 months ago, even 6 months ago, realistically. And we need to have that increase in requirements reflected in some way, because it's fairly important, and without that, the DAO wouldn't be able to undertake some of the things that we need to be doing.
And
Another,
just to put a fine point on this is not in particular a challenge with GovV2 per se. This is I would say a challenge that any projects in the sector that are going to be looking at pursuing a more proactive approach to regulation are going to be faced with. I think Blichter's laid out a great overall overview in that document for anyone that wants to see why why this makes sense for us as a project. For those that don't, it's okay as well. The general point is we have a lot of advantages that come from it, but the challenges are, as a DAO, regulators just they don't have a very good framework in place yet, even one as proactive as VARA in dealing with a structure like ours. And so it's not unique to V2, but what we did see is there are opportunities to get in front of some of those risk points with the changes here in V3.
Yep, absolutely. One of the other challenges with GovV2 was the structure for governance V2. It was an unintended consequence that it kind of excluded some experts from participating in governance. The reality is that many of the people that we might want to use as advisors, they don't have the time to commit to being involved in day-to-day discussions within Discord, voting on proposals, engaging with the community, and having that sort of holistic perspective on governance. And the structure we had in GovV2 demanded that essentially everybody be participating on that level. And the net result of that was that we kind of excluded experts by accident, I suppose. And that was something that wasn't working with GovV2. So those are sort of the main points of what we felt wasn't working with GovV2. Some of the things in GovV2 were working and are being retained, and I just want to go over those quickly. So like Annie alluded to, the IMC has been performing some of the duties, engaging with regulators, but sort of the problem was that requirement wasn't necessarily made clear in our governance documentation. And it's really pretty important that it is clear, because if somebody's not interested in that, the IMC would not be appropriate for them to run for a position on. Another thing that was working was engaging with labs directly and having additional contact points with labs as compared to before GovV2 has been a net positive for the DAO. Be able to hear from various team members on different perspectives or different elements of development have resulted in more informed decision making and, in general, better proposals. Community engagement and communication is important, and continuing to make accessible ways to engage with governance is important. I know some people might have mixed feelings on that, but on the whole, I think that went reasonably well this past epoch. Wanted to talk about specialization. So specialization is referring to the different sub-councils, marketing, strategy, and gaming under GovV2. That specialization is valuable, and it's appropriate to have people who are really focused in on those elements. But the thing that maybe wasn't working as well is that we don't necessarily need those specialists to be involved in decision making. They can provide value and they can provide context without needing to be involved in things like gathering sentiment from the community or voting on proposals. So specialization was something that we felt was valuable. Additionally, 5-member councils are working well. We kind of evaluated whether we wanted to change council sizes, but 5-member councils are functional. Scheduling can be difficult. We do have people across the globe, and if we increased council members from 5, that would be in some cases extremely challenging to schedule a meeting. And additionally, any more people would reduce the efficiency in meetings. Just hearing out 7 perspectives takes a fair bit longer than 5. So we felt council size was fairly appropriate. So, but that's sort of the background for where we were at and why we were evaluating some governance changes. And I'll let Annie speak a bit more about how some of those problems are solved in GovV3.
Yeah, thanks, Blichter. Good overview for the audience. I would like to just offer for anyone, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll absolutely try to address those as we go along with relevant points. I know there's been some really good dialogue in terms of feedback to the proposal when it came out. Obviously, for anyone that's seen it, the general sentiment is very positive, which we surmised it would be. I think even we were a little bit surprised at quite how positive the sentiment is overall, which is a good sign. That said, in terms of why V3 specifically, I would say the intent here is to really hone in on keeping the best parts of V2 and addressing parts where maybe we swung the pendulum a little bit too far from GovV1 to address some of these key points. We spoke already about regulatory structure and why that's relevant, and also some changes that have been maybe more long-standing that have been topics identified that it made sense to put into a structure like this. So the most important overarching message that I want everyone to take away today is in this structure, we do take the approach to more centralize the decision making into the IMC, recognizing that the importance of specialists and specialization, having individuals that are highly knowledgeable as advisors is critically important. And in GovV2, we took the step to create a structure that recognized that. The key advantage, though, that we see moving to V3 is instead of having those experts be required to be the actual end decision makers for the process, let's try and increase the bar to have even more expert individuals that are serving in truly a kind of advise and consent role. And then have a smaller number of individuals that are still, at the end of the day, responsible. I'm always reminded in these types of discussions, the former regional program manager that I worked for, he would always remind me that the role in leadership is to always have one single neck to choke if things go wrong. And this is very apropos in a DAO as well. Having 18 or 25 or 30 different people who are all generally responsible for topics can work great, but it's a lot harder to really direct your feedback to anyone in particular if you as a community feel like the process is not working as well as it should be. Obviously, you can reach out to any of those council members, but you have a lot more diffusion of the responsibility. That said, in this case, the experts still should be supporting to bring their knowledge into the IMC, but the IMC at the end of the day are in the lead for final calls on behalf of the DAO. We also feel that, as Blichter mentioned, the community council is really critical. We need to stay close and locked in with the community. We've mentioned a lot, and I think I've given my feedback. The council has a critical role of listening regularly to the community on all major issues. I always make the comment that I'm a pretty regular lurker in all of the channels that are getting feedback and seeing action. I don't often engage as much directly in terms of the public face, but in order to make sure that I didn't miss something, having a group like the Community Council this epoch has been invaluable. And so we had the discussion. I think this is one of the points that has been raised. Why is the Community Council even needed? We've had dialogue about some of the roles that they're filling, maybe being better served with a governance community manager at some point. That said, having a council who is directly integrating with the community is super critical, both from a decentralization standpoint, as well as just being an additional check on the IMC that we have in place. Another point that we felt is really important with V3 is this concept of active recruiting. For those that have been following, I think Kieran was very open that he felt this was an opportunity that we missed over the last epoch or two, where being very proactive, as in this case the team, but also as the community, in going out and finding these experts to encourage them to get more involved and take one of these roles. In this case, the committee role is going to be much more appealing to a lot of these individuals than a fairly heavy time investment of a sub-council. And so this is a really key change point that I'm very confident will allow us to up the quality of the committee members. And that said, look, I think I want to be very careful here and recognize the individuals that have served this epoch across all of the councils and sub-councils. This shouldn't be taken as a knock on them. Instead, it should be viewed in the light that it's intended, where with a project of the magnitude of Illuvium to legitimately be game-changing for the entire industry, there are many, many individuals that are very on board philosophically, that want Web3 gaming to be highly successful, and that would be willing to work with a project like Illuvium, whereas very few, maybe no other projects have that opportunity. And so we should absolutely take advantage of that. And it's not at all a negative reflection on anyone in the community or in the councils today that that's the case. In terms of the council member numbers and the number of councils, I spoke about why IMC and community makes sense. I'll just echo pretty firmly Blichter's point about the number of 5 being a very, very good value. We did have a fair amount of discussion about, does going down to a 3 or going up to a 7-person council for any of these make sense. There's potentially some argument for community to maybe go up to 7. That said, the actual decision-making, voting, discussion process gets very, very complex when you increase beyond 5, and to say nothing of the actual just coordination that's necessary. And viewing the community and the IMC as decision-making bodies first, rather than team members, in this case really helped us to land at this proposal to start with 5. And of course, like anything, this is not intended to be set in stone. We may reevaluate over the course of the next epoch, assuming we go forward here as a community, but 5 really is a good number. And in my experience, any given topic, you're going to have 1 or 2 people that may not be so knowledgeable or have such a strong opinion. If you only have 3 people, it's very difficult if that happens. It's really 1 or 2 people just talking with themselves. If you have 7 or even 9 people, for instance, in a council, it's really impossible for everyone to even get to weigh in on more than 1 or 2 topics over the course of a meeting. It just doesn't work that way, given the amount of time that you can spend in a 2-hour meeting on a topic. And then the last point I think I want to highlight is the timing. There have been some questions and discussion about the 9-month extension from 6 months. This is one that, having now personally been on a couple councils, and I'd be keen to hear Blichter and Caveman's feedback. 6 months, if it was, let's say, truly a full 6 month, is about right. The challenge with the process is, as a new council member coming in, even if there's carryover from epoch to epoch, you've got an entirely new group that has formed. The first 2 to 4 weeks are really getting a handle on the key topics that are running, figuring out where each person is going to be bringing the most value in a council, so that you can work together. And then, as everyone here knows, the last month, basically, you've got the elections for the next epoch that are going. I wouldn't say that you're necessarily like out so busy campaigning in this role, but you do want to be very cautious as a council member not to make a decision that's going to handicap the next council coming in with a topic that might be better suited for the incoming group, as that's being decided. And so you end up with really closer to 4 months, maybe 4.5 months of active work. And so having a longer epoch allows you to still recognize that you're going to have some give on the front and back end, but this should give us more like 7.5 months of active involvement from a council, which, if you do the math, that's almost twice as effective in 1.5 amount of the time. And so overall, I think the 9 months is a very good fit. It was I want to say pretty unanimous in terms of the feedback from most of the other council members that I spoke to, that a single council epoch goes very quickly if you're in that role. I will say, then the question comes, well, why not go to 12 months? We also do know that life happens, and in my experience with not just Alluvium, but other councils that I've worked on and observed, over the course of a typical year, you'll often have 1 or 2 people in a council this size that are getting ready to maybe change either jobs in their personal life, or their individual situation has shifted, and this reduces the chance that you're going to have people that basically towards the tail end of the epoch have drifted away from active involvement. Right, for 9 months, it's a lot easier to keep people engaged than for 12. If someone does need to step down, obviously we have process for that. We have still the vote of no confidence structure in place. If it's something that's identified within the councils or within the community. So I still think we have appropriate controls there, but 9 months, in my view, just makes a ton of sense, having gone through the process. I don't think it's too long that people feel like they're in for life. So that's really where the balance landed in terms of the extension for the time window. And then, we didn't really have many questions on the structures. I think they're fairly straightforward for the specific committees. Obviously, we took basically the 3 second level sub-councils that we have in the current structure, and we added now an operation, one that takes some of the work that the risk management committee was intended to cover, and then also adds some finance pieces in here. I'm very confident we'll have some really amazing individuals that are able to join us in that space as well. And really at the end, it's about making sure that we have the right people to advise the councils, whatever walks they're coming from. And so at the end of the day, there's still going to be other pieces that we know, as a council member this epoch, there are several individual IIPs and ICCPs that have either been passed or that are even in discussions now around, like the GIP process and some others, that we're going to have to make some further adjustments to fit those into this structure. This was one of the reasons why we had some consideration about introducing this, and the timing. It's a fairly quick cycle time to get something like this in place. That said, we all felt that it made more sense to go ahead and do it now. Take the step, feeling like this is the right thing to do on behalf of the DAO, even if it might be a little bit quicker than some of us are comfortable with. And we can absolutely work through some of those details for how those processes need to be tweaked when you no longer have the sub-councils that would have been in place for those topics. So those are some of the key points around sort of why GovV3, why individual items are there, that I've seen questions about in the chat and in discussions. Topics that we've had in the councils. I see a few of the other council members that are here in the audience, and which I really appreciate. Please feel free to chime in. I saw Ricky made a comment in the chat. I think Scrub is out here too. So yeah, add your own take on topics as well, where you see fit. And I'm going to turn it over to Caveman to talk a little bit now about where we see things going over the next bit. What's coming up next as far as GovV3.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Annie. And just to address your point on epoch length, I definitely feel that it was quick, it was fast moving, and for the first couple weeks, I definitely feel like we weren't in a position to really do much to contribute in a meaningful way, and I wanted to, and so I think extending that to 9 months is significant. Blicker, if you want to mention that real quick, and then I'll wrap up if what your thoughts are on epoch length.
Yeah, onboarding is it's extremely important. Some of the topics that council covers needs a lot of context to be able to make good decisions. And the reality is that as we keep evolving, as we pursue things like regulatory clarity, that onboarding process it's not going to get shorter. It's only going to get longer. And the lower percentage of an epoch we can have spent onboarding, the more effective council is going to be. So
Yeah.
well, in the
And
past, I felt it was a bit of a risk point to have these epochs moved to a longer structure, knowing what some of the activities we're engaging in are now, and how long it can take to become comfortable with them, much less make good decisions on behalf of the DAO on those topics. It absolutely makes sense to have longer epochs.
Yeah, and as the IMC member that was new this epoch, like, sorting through the channel, the legal channel, just scrolling back months and months of y'all debating and discussing all the documentation, it takes a minute to get sped up there. So I definitely think that'll be a positive motion for this governance. But we still have work to do. And so there's a couple topics that we think are still being worked on. One of those is implementing the rest of what was good from V2 into the V3 documentation. In this IIP, we kept it fairly bare bones just to get the main points across. But there was still a lot of just the processes and everything that will be in there, as Annie's mentioned. We need to make sure that we also just find the best way to incorporate gamer feedback. And that's just in general. We're still, we love, and this is the positive, the best thing about the DAO is having the community, having the DAO be able to provide feedback. And so we need to figure out the best way to do that. So obviously we have Vetamore's GIP in the motion. That's really going to be helpful there, and we're going to figure out how to incorporate that. But finding out how to do that is huge. We need to figure out our process for how we're going to handle new game pitches. Johnny has alluded to one already, which to some who find that a little frustrating, we decided to hold that back in the Game Sub Council. But finding a good balance of when to present these and how to present them, how are we going to rate which game pitches are we going to move forward with, a lot of different situations to go there. So that we're hoping to have at least a solution proposed by the end of the this epoch, to then incorporate into V3. Then any outstanding proposals we still have, I think we've got ScoreX's tournament proposal, which is coming through, which will be, we got to make sure that works with the new structure as well. And I think that's a lot of what we're doing. But I just want to wrap up by saying, governance is still being updated, and it will be an iterative process. It'll change as our game expands and as we find more efficient and effective ways to govern. This is a gaming engine that is just getting started. Like, I want to remind everyone that this is a new concept, but at the core, the DAO is supposed to give the customer or the gamers in our industry a voice, which has in many other studios been ignored by the community. I'm optimistic that we're going to find a structure that promotes that healthy ecosystem where the games will come out far superior quality than what is in their traditional counterparts. And I can already see it, actually. I just finished Assassin's Creed Mirage, and I can say confidently that Overworld has many advantages, and that's a huge studio like Ubisoft. So I cannot wait for this game to come out next year, and I really think we're going to make some big waves. And so that's what I have to say for this, and I think we're going to open up to questions unless you guys have anything else to say.
Yeah, maybe the only point I would highlight is around what's next as far as VARA. And so again, for those that didn't get a chance to review the document in the news, this will be the other key point that I would say, whoever ends up in the IMC and the community councils and in the committees next epoch will, I'm almost certain, be expected to wrestle with some kinds of feedback from VARA, and we'll have to make some major decisions on behalf of the DAO at this point. So some of which we aren't sure because honestly, VARA is not sure right now. They're a regulator that initially has been focused on DeFi regulation, recognizes as a jurisdiction that GameFi is relevant. They have reached out to to us and to other projects to have discussions in a proactive way about how to manage the space. And it's also very different trying to steer, in their defense, a project like Illuvium versus an L1 or L2 blockchain, right? Or a structure like a centralized exchange or something like that. And so, very different industries in gaming versus finance. We're obviously at the intersection of the two, and so as we get feedback from them, that will be a work in progress, both in terms of us having dialogue with them as the regulator, and also us taking their feedback and making adjustments into our structure to become really that best in class governance organization among the entire gaming industry in Web3.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say, just since it doesn't look like we have any questions currently, I just wanted to mention that it continues to be super important for people to provide their feedback on topics, including governance. I know there was a proposal earlier this epoch to disband the marketing subcouncil. That did end up with about a 50-50 upvote downvote ratio, but that helped make it clear to us that there were things the community felt weren't working. Obviously, we shared that sentiment, and being able to receive that feedback from the community is important. I know sometimes it can feel like, oh, well, this didn't get acted on right away. When the community provides feedback, we do look at it, we do consider it, and we will work to resolve any problems the community is having with the way things are working. So I just want to say that I appreciate it, even when things sometimes can get a little bit hostile. It's super important. So most of the people here are already fairly involved in governance, but just wanted to thank you for that and say please continue giving feedback. It's incredibly important how the DAO operates. So.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hands. And thank you guys for being up here answering the questions. Excited to get this moving along. Excuse me if there's a train horn in the recording, because a train decided to honk its horn the whole way past my house. Somebody's got a question. I can't see who the name is, so...
It's Skoriox. So it's probably because you were too busy heckling him about being late. But in general, good question, Skoriox. So for those that can't see it, any contingency plans if the committee system fails, and in particular the concern of lack of interaction with them. So it's a great question. I think fails, I would just say, is probably a little bit of a relative sense, right? The main risk that I would see is not that like the entire governance structure just doesn't work. It's that we're not really getting value out of the individuals. Don't take it the wrong way, Skoriox. I think the risk is they're not being helpful. It's too difficult for us to get in touch with the individuals in that framework. We're not able to still attract the right people. Those topics are points that in the future the IMC Next Epoch is going to have to evaluate. I would say that at a minimum, the option exists, and this has already been stated in terms of the framework. If there's an individual or a few individuals that are just not really supporting at the level that we would expect to see, they can be removed and then put in place for to have someone else put in their place as committee members. I mentioned one point that I think may not be so clear as a community member, but even regardless of all of the the amazing contacts that I might personally have, because they're not in general under NDA, and in some cases these might be individuals that are building other projects. They're building potential competitors to Illuvium. I'm not going to have those discussions with those individuals on my own, right? And so what I would say is there are plenty of folks in Web3 in particular who are very eager to share and support other studios that are trying to build things the right way. There's very much a shared benefit if the sector does well. And so I remain very confident that even if some individuals are not providing a lot of value, the IMC will recognize that and has the ability to then, ask them to step down due to time commitments or just an inability to really help meet the DAO's needs at that moment. I would expect that the individuals that we're looking to bring onto these committees recognize that. I mean, honestly, they're serving, on behalf of the DAO anyways, as there's not direct compensation to them personally in this framework. And so as a result, I think the committee structure itself can stay very flexible. And it's up to the IMC to make that evaluation as they're the ones that are going to figure out how good quality feedback they're getting. The second question, why 9 months and not 12 months for length? Yeah, so I did mention this one a little bit earlier. The 12-month window, even from my own personal experience, is very challenging. In other councils that I've seen, typically at the 8 to 9 month mark, you have folks that their situations have changed. They're not as involved in a project anymore. They have personal life adjustments, and it's time for them to move on. If you've got a 9-month epoch, it's about the right amount of time. If you have a 12-month, then you're often going to be searching for a replacement by the end of that cycle. And so it's not impossible to do so, but I think 12 months it's pretty long in Web3 terms, in terms of real life people's commitments and time frame. And so I do from just observation think that 9 months has been proven to be a better timing than 6 or than 12. But again, the community, you can certainly give us that feedback and see what they think and what they've seen. But for me, it's due to just empirical evaluation.
And just to Talila's question, I definitely agree that maybe a standard could be really beneficial for that. That way there's some clarity there. But I think a lot of times it does come down to NDAs. And her question was, just for the recording, is I don't know if that's being shown, is the notes for councils sometimes seem to be lacking information, and sometimes it leaves more questions than understanding. And so having our council notes is us trying to be visible with what we can, and unfortunately some of that we either needs to be confidential or is strictly under NDA.
Let me bring up Sneaky Poke here for a question real quick, and then I think we got DJ slapping or a couple more, but here, let me bring up Sneaky Poke real quick.
Hello? Hear me?
Yeah, you're a little bit quiet.
Try to speak up. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I have a question about Vara. I know it's kind of early days for this question because of all the regulatory uncertainty, but what kind of considerations went into, I don't know, maybe a potential no turning back scenario by committing to Vara as a regulatory body? Because a part of me thinks that maybe Illuvium knows that it might not be able to meet what the SEC in the United States might bring forward in terms of regulation. And I'm curious what kind of contingency plans we have if the United States has a much more strict regulatory requirements that might make us ineligible to even have a U.S. market for this game.
I can
so-
start it, or you
Go
want to,
ahead.
Annie?
Go ahead, Caveman. I'll jump in.
Sweet.
After.
So, and this is speaking purely on myself. I think, Vara is a stepping stone. That this is us getting used to the regulatory system and the ecosystem, showing that, hey, we are trying to be compliant as much as we can. And then if the US comes and they are more strict and they have other regulations, I feel that I would support pushing any regulations to meet those standards, because in my opinion, I don't think we're going to reach that explosion that a lot of us dream about unless we are meeting regulatory compliance there. So in my opinion, I would be pushing for that, and I think that we would push for that in general. I'll let Annie speak then.
Yeah, Sneaky, it's a fantastic question. The main point that I'd add to what Caveman shared is we, as a DAO, any journal that has attempted to give some clarity to what their approach is from a regulatory standpoint in this sector was under consideration. And so I say that going all the way back to last epoch, when really the wheels got put in motion all the way back at almost the start of last epoch. So almost a year ago, we had discussions at that point in time, back when there was only one council, and we worked very, obviously the legal team at Illuvium has been fantastic here. We worked very hand in hand as the council and the team to look at what options existed. But at the end of the day, if you have a jurisdiction that is not providing any clarity, any type of guidance, it makes it pretty impossible to try and comply with regulatory approaches that are just not there. And so this is, in your example of the U.S., in some other jurisdictions, where we were in Australia before, it's a very challenging environment because there's just no clarity that's being provided. In some cases, it appears by design from the regulators. And so, with that said, you as a project are either left to try and find your own way and make something up to the best of your abilities without having guidance, or find a jurisdiction that you can be structured under that is trying to actually give some clarity and that allows you to say, okay, here's what we're building. Here's how we believe it's beneficial for the community, for gamers, and then try and come in compliance into that framework, which is where we are today. And so, in terms of final decisions, nothing has been finalized now. We're still honestly waiting for a lot of the feedback from Varo on the initial application, and so that will proceed apace, going assuredly in the next epoch. It could even potentially go into the one after, depending on timing and how quickly VAR gets the final structures in place. But that said, those considerations around what does it mean for the DAO? What does it mean in terms of our structures? How can we be compliant? That's going to be the responsibility of the next IMC to evaluate, and to honestly use some of these advisors that are going to be in the committees that oftentimes will have a lot of experience, be they leads of game studios or DeFi projects, be they individuals that are attorneys specialized in the sector. And this gives us the opportunity to really work with them to get some other eyes on the process. And I would say I've seen that play out in my own personal experience with ETH Lizards. As I've had chances to now interact with about a half dozen different attorneys in different projects. And each one of them has a different view based on the work that they've been able to do in the sector. But when you can put it all together, it really helps you have a good picture of different jurisdictions and the approaches. And so that should be the expectations of future councils as well, is to take that feedback from VARA and continue to just evaluate the regulatory landscape as things evolve. And does what the U.S. Do matter? 100%. We've got a lot of community members that are in the U.S., and at the end of the day, we have to find a jurisdiction that we can actually get some transparency for.
I see Blicker unmuted. Do you want to say something?
No, I was just going to. I think Annie already explained it fairly well, but trying to mention that this is very much so something that's still fluid. Crypto regulation is evolving on the time frame of days or weeks, right? Especially when we're talking about the specifics with VARA. So at a high level, if becoming licensed with VARA doesn't end up being something that works out, the structures in GovV3 are designed in a way where they're most likely to be able to be compatible with other regulators, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily a structure that's specifically catered to VARA. It's something that I think reasonably would be able to engage with other regulators, which may have emerging policies, which we might be able to engage with in the future. But yeah, it remains to be seen.
And just to add one more thing too, in recent news, you got Gods Unchained. They just got delisted from Epic Games Store. I'm not sure if the exact reason came out, but I've heard rumors that it has to do with the ESRB rating and them being mentioned as a gambling company, gambling gaming. So that's something that we also have to consider in this. And I know that I think I remember VAR being strictly against gambling. So that's something that we're also have to take into consideration.
Yeah, and I would also like to just quickly add too. I'm hoping that Illuvium considers potentially be willing to pay a fine as well, because in my view, I think the SEC would probably say, well, we've already transgressed. We weren't central or decentralized enough when we started. We had maybe some questionable tweets early on. Maybe, we had basically tokens being sold and being allocated to the team early on, and the SEC really doesn't like that. So I'm hoping that when the game gets released, and I'm hoping it makes a lot of money, that potentially we're forward thinking about this and maybe save up some money for a fine if we want to keep selling to the US. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on it.
All right. Well, thanks for coming up. Anybody else got their hands raised? No. There's a couple more questions in here. DJ Slappin, is there a vetting process for committee members? Will the council have to approve them?
Yeah, so the committee members under GovV3 are appointed. So essentially, the way things are going to work is there's going to be a nomination period for IMC and committee members. At the end of that nomination period, there's an election for the IMC. Following that, there's a period in which the IMC evaluates the nominations for committees and appoints members to those committees. So yeah, part of the nomination process for committees will be essentially people saying, this is who I am, this is a bit about my background, this is why I'd be a good fit on this committee, and then the IMC will appoint people to those committees.
I don't think I saw any more questions in here. This is recorded for anybody that showed up late. It won't take me long to upload it. I think it's going to be significantly shorter than some of our other ones, and then I'll post that link in the governance news section. But yeah, I don't see any other questions. Would you support having 3 monthly peer reviews instead of just 2? I think that was
Yes.
a splendor. Yeah.
The point of the peer reviews is to keep the community up to date on the performance of their elected council members. And the way it was passed originally was that basically we had one at the halfway point and then one as we were coming into elections, which frankly is probably the more important one in most cases, but still important for the community to have some visibility on how council and team feel their peers are performing. So yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with adjusting that. And that's sort of one of the things that I know Caveman mentioned, that we need to do some work updating the GovV2 structure and some of the proposals that have passed this epoch to align with GovV3. That's sort of the things that we're referring to there. Is there's a couple processes that will just need like minor updates, minor tweaks to make the most amount of sense under the structure. And so that's what we'll be trying to do prior to the end of the epoch. But before we did that, we wanted to reach out to the community via the proposal and just make sure that there was support for the broad structure, so that we weren't going ahead and updating a bunch of documentation for no reason if the community didn't want this. So yeah, that absolutely is something that I would be in favor of personally.
Oh, we got JP showed up. He's here. I don't know if he has a question or if he wants to say something.
Bring the man up. He came just immediately following his wedding. I mean,
Oh
my
yeah,
God.
congratulations.
Kieran took a month off. At least JP's here working it. No, good. Welcome back, JP.
Yeah, good to be back. Yeah, I just got back in town from my wedding, so I've been a little bit unplugged, obviously, but I just saw the tweet about the IMC town hall, so figured I'd hop in and see what's good with you guys. I have been keeping up with messages on the side, but yeah, just glad to be here. Happy to weigh in on anything if needed, but I'm sure these 3 fine gentlemen have been covering it, so. But yeah, hope everyone's doing well.
Congratulations. But I think we're done. No more questions, guys. Like I said, we'll get it uploaded as soon as possible. Anything you guys want to say before we go?
PvP's coming soon. Can't wait.
For those that are enjoying Illuvium Beyond, keep your eyes out. I'm not going to drop any alpha, but sometime next Wednesday might see some interesting happenings in that space.
All right. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. As soon as it gets uploaded, I'll put it on the Governance News channel for everyone to check out. So have a good day, night, wherever you are.
Thanks, Rich.
Yep.